A long national nightmare has come to an end. At least it's in the process of ending. And again, so many Christians turned out to vote back on November 8th. Millions went to vote, even though the polls told them it was useless. They mailed in their absentee ballots, even when Hillary Clinton was planning her fireworks victory celebration, and they looked at the empty factories. They looked at a lot of things, and they came home to their children and grandchildren and told them they had done the best they could for their future. So we're talking about that for the hour. And Michelle Bachmann, a lot of things that we need to hit on yet. We've got Rent-A-Mob going on all over the country as we speak, thanks to George Soros. I want to talk about that for a minute or two, or however long it takes to discuss that, because this is a really tragic, this is truly the legacy of Barack Obama, and that's the lawlessness that is being poured out across the land. First, I want to play a short clip of Amir Tsarfati. He's sort of giving a bit of a warning to the church. I want to play that. We can discuss it. Then I want to move into what we talked about off air, because you are so concerned for the under 35-year-old generation, and you've got some in your own family. First, that little short clip.
If now everybody will go back to their old ways and there is no real change, then all of this was for nothing. I believe that God has granted the request of the people for one last chance. And I believe that He honored the millions of born-again, Spirit-filled Americans that were on their knees asking and pleading and begging God for Him to intervene and to stop that amazing avalanche of evil from coming onto America. But now comes the test. The test is, okay, I have given you what you wanted, what you asked for. I am going to stop that evil at your request, but what are you going to do about it? You know, throughout the history of Israel, this is exactly what Joshua said to the people right before they entered into the promised land. They are about to do the most amazing thing, historic night also for them right before they crossed the Jordan, entering into the promised land. And Joshua says, you're about to go into the promised land. You're about to get everything you were dreaming of after 40 years in the wilderness. And Joshua says, probably the way I see things, you're going to get complacent. You're going to just walk away from God. And then he says, but as for me, in my household, we will serve the Lord. And my request from all of you today is that this new beginning, this new chapter, maybe in the history of America, will also be a new chapter in your own life, in your own walking with the Lord, of your family's life, of your church's life, of your community's life. This is the time to declare that as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. God gave us a glimpse of hope in that dark presence of demonic activity in America right now. There is hope.
Again, Amir Tsarfati is one of my conference speakers the last 2 years and next year as well. Your response to that, Michelle?
Well, I think there's no question that America under Donald Trump will begin to feel an economic boom. I think there's no way that we couldn't if we see Obamacare go away and tax rates lowered and unnecessary regulatory burdens removed from us. We will just see a boom, because no other country in the world is doing this, where they're embracing true free market policies. So that will be a very good thing. Now, one thing I want to mention about this election, as believers came out in record numbers to vote, as they got on their knees, as they went through protracted days of prayer and fasting, they did that to turn to God, to ask Him to move His heart in compassion toward America and give us yet one more chance. And He graciously answered that prayer. But that does not mean, Jan, that our nation is in revival. It doesn't mean that we have a great awakening that has begun. That would be my heart cry, that we would have a great awakening. And I would encourage and ask your listeners to maintain a position of prayer and fasting before the Lord, seeking the Lord. Our nation needs revival. We need a great awakening. Spiritually, there's bankruptcy from one corner of this country to another. We need that level of commitment toward the Lord and in our pulpits. And I would encourage your listeners, that's where we need to stay. This was just a beginning on the election. We saw, again, the biggest biggest story of the year, exhibit A of what God does. But we have to stay in obedience with the Lord to continue to see his hand. And we need the spiritual unity with the Lord and the spiritual blessings from him.
You expressed some real concern to me, and you have some children who are the sort of millennial age, and you indicated that they had a real difficult time accepting and voting for Donald Trump. Probably the legacy of Barack Hussein Obama is the lawlessness we see as we are speaking spread across the land, and the Marxism that has been promoted in our country for 100 years obviously went on steroids in the last 8 years.
Yeah.
And we are losing that under 35 generation. If the Lord tarries and they become our leaders in another 20 years,
We're gone.
That is a big concern.
We are gone. If their current mindset stays the way it is, and again, a 35-year-old isn't a child. A 35-year-old is an adult. But from what I have seen around the country, because I went all across the country campaigning, those who are 35 years of age and younger, some even approaching up into 40 years of age, what is remarkable, Jan, is that it seems that they have embraced a worldview way of thinking that embraces economic Marxism.
That's right.
Now, that's hard for us to believe. We were taught when we were growing up, socialism is a terrible thing. Marxism, communism, they are terrible things. They are terrible things. There isn't one country in the world where Marxism has done anything for a country except destroy it. And I'd say take a look at Venezuela, where 15% of the people have to get their food out of garbage cans today, literally. We are looking at a situation where Christian kids now, in Christian colleges, from Christian homes, all across the United States, the ones that we're about to hand the baton off to become our new leaders in this society, they have fully embraced economic Marxism with a thin veneer of Christianity over it. Because Christianity to them, in many ways, is about being nice to poor people.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with being good to poor people. One of our children is a missionary, and this is something we have to do not only in foreign countries, but here in the United States.
So the Tony Campolos and the Jim Wallaces have had a profound impact, you're saying?
I would say that, in my opinion, those who are age 35 and younger, in some cases 40 and younger, they tend to embrace the Tony Campolo, Jim Wallace view of the world. These are kids who've come out of the most godly homes, who've had teaching and background in Christian schools, maybe perhaps even biblical worldview training. But the tide and the current of the culture is so strong, Jan. They are pummeled with economic Marxism by the day, and a sense that Israel is an illegitimate occupier of its own biblical land. So while this was one of the biggest miracles that I have seen, quite literally, on election night, where I literally felt some of the Shekinah glory of God across this country revealing itself in the way he so miraculously answered prayer. As I look forward to this next generation, I don't see that they have the understanding and the biblical underpinnings to get the biblical basis of what God says about issues and what truth is. Because for the last 8 years under Barack Obama, we have literally seen, as Isaiah talks about, truth has been poured out into the streets here in the United States. Most young kids don't even know what truth is anymore. That's how they can embrace men being in girls' bathrooms and think that somehow it's discriminatory to keep them out. We can't even fathom that. That's bizarre thinking. But if you're under 35, you can deal with that. If you're under 40, it seems normal. This is a huge disconnect. This is something that I am begging the pulpits to get involved in, and to reach out, for all of us to reach out to those who are 45, 40, 35 years of age and younger, and recognize we've got to cry out to God for their sakes, so that the Bible becomes true, authoritative, and absolute.
Very well put. There were certainly some negative voices, and we've kind of made a commitment here to keep things on a positive plane here for this discussion. But honestly, Michelle, you had Russell Moore from the Southern Baptist Convention confusing people. Let's leave it at that. You had entire publications, Christianity Today, Christian Post. We had Dr. John Piper telling people we don't have to vote because we're citizens of heaven. We're not citizens of this earth. earth. And this is terribly confusing, not just to the younger generation, but to everybody. I was intrigued with George Will, who called Donald Trump nauseating chemotherapy. And yet on Fox News Sunday on November 13th, he was singing his praises. I mean, there was such a turnaround.
It's so sickening.
Those that
because-
were so negative were beaming.
Well, exactly, because they were proved horribly,
Yes.
horribly wrong. Because when it came down to it, there was no third-party alternative. There never is. It is always just two choices. Hillary Clinton was the most obvious negative choice for the future of America. Donald Trump was able to get her to say during the course of the debates multiple times that she would be fine with taking away the life of an unborn child, even on the day that it's born. I don't know one human being who could say something like that. And yet Donald Trump got Hillary Clinton to expose just how dramatically she embraces a pro-death culture. That's exactly what she does. Yeah. But we saw people, as you stated, in the Christian community who were not willing to get behind Donald Trump, and also in the conservative community. And that's, again, part of why I say this election result was analogous to me as Elijah and the prophets of Baal. It was so impossible. He had nothing going for him. He didn't have a ground game.
Yep,
People don't realize that.
That's right.
The Republican convention was held in the state of Ohio, and the Ohio governor wouldn't even go to the convention. He was a Republican, and he pulled whatever political ground game there was out of Ohio, and you can't win without Ohio, the presidency. It was one miracle after another that no man did, but God did. And I believe he did it, again, Jan, for the sake of the Jewish state and the Jewish people. He was gracious and kind to believers in this country. And that's why it's our task now to spread the gospel like never before. The time is short. Our time is short on this world. And we need to remember why we're here, to hand off the baton, to share the good news, to free the captives, and to let them know what the gospel can do for this world.